how have you been enjoying the show so far?
The show is noticeably more exhibitors, which is great.
Right.
So, if you look at the last few years, it was, I guess, right after the crash and the recession, it got a little light. But you look around, there's tons of people, which is great, and it's very healthy.
What are you seeing? So clearly, the increase in participants indicates a trend in the industry. What are some of the trends from your standpoint that you're seeing in the last 12, 24 months from your standpoint?
Well, as we each year, it's really a running conversation. It's startups and apps.
Yeah.
The increase in speed at the ability to make applications is the driving force. And add to that, something like $5 billion in capital now over the last 2 years in startups. It's just an incredible amount of money. So, and yesterday in one of the sessions, they were talking about perhaps 2,700 or 2,500 startups that the VC guys are tracking. That's a ridiculous number of startups, right? So, unfortunately, many of them will not succeed.
Right.
Some will. They'll be here, the ones that do succeed.
Yeah.
And the pace of change is faster, but the friction is still there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things that I continue to pound on, and every year we talk about the same thing, and to some extent it hasn't changed. And forgetting vendors' openness, which I always rail on, and I want to continue to push the vendors.
Sure.
Because I think it's better for the community to be open, and some are coming around more than others, but keeping that political topic aside, so to speak, you have the complexity of the data model. Real estate's a funny business in that the customer record is so wide and so deep and has so many fields. Unlike, in the typical supply chain business, what's complicated is the logistics and the ordering process and manufacturing process. Here, your order is a lease, 10 years, and it's got 1 billion terms and conditions that have to be recorded and met. And each part of the application stack that runs the business needs a certain piece of that data. And so it's the ability for the products to really exchange data seamlessly that is probably the biggest piece of friction that is of concern.
How does Vornado address that friction?
So for us, fortunately, we're large enough that we scale. So at scale, the answer is we handle all the integrations on our own. So we are capable of creating web service interfaces with the products we need to, ETL with others, but essentially we've engineered mostly our own interfaces with the various products that surround our wheel, which are our application that runs the business. But not the smaller customers then are faced with the question of, can I really buy the best of breed?
Right.
And how do I cobble them together? They need better vendor support, which is slow to come. But probably, I think, and I speak to people about this now and then, maybe it's time in the real estate business for a data bus. The real estate industry is not serviced by an independent EDI-type third-party data exchange layer. And perhaps it's not a big enough business, but it does contain enough disparate software products to warrant it.
Yeah.
And maybe as a result today, with the increase in the number of vendors out there and the need, maybe the answer is it'll start to spring up, particularly when you can think about $5 billion in capital.
Right.
So does it make sense for some independent third party? And then you simply make connectors, and you have a connector for Yardi, you have a connector for Honest Buildings, a connector for VTS, and wherever you are, you simply plug into the bus. And I see that and I've been talking to people for the last year or so, as a possibility.
Larry Smarr, the keynote, was here as well. He talked about how his vision of the future is each person has their own data in their body, right? Your blood type, your blood work, your cholesterol levels, and we all have this sort of shame, I don't want anyone to know that. But if, in fact, he uploaded his data and you uploaded yours and I uploaded mine, we would then be able to open source the human body and then have the solutions and the opportunities would be exponentially greater because we're sharing that data. So it's interesting, it somehow is in line with what you're saying as well, because there would also be a greater opportunity for information sharing as well that could be prescriptive.
It is analogous in a sense, certainly, but one of the differences, and not just a small difference, is not so small, but in that case, it's all about deep learning, machine learning, and diagnostics. There's no question the medical industry will be greatly advanced when all of this data is anonymized and up there. And so in the real estate play, I guess there's two sides to it. There are a lot of people out there that are looking at all these platforms aggregating data, and when and if they anonymize it properly, the question is it marketable and valuable? And that's a piece of the industry. But just the operability piece, a company wants to use these 10 products, how do they fit together? I think that's where I spend more of my time. We are not so interested in anonymizing data. We typically don't contribute our data.
Right.
We're in 2 markets. We know the markets extremely well.
Yeah.
So that's not us, but.
You mentioned pace of change. How is Vornado keeping up with the pace of change? How is it keeping the pace of change?
It's not easy. I speak to my colleagues here and we talk about the same thing, and we all conclude we can't possibly look at everything that comes across our desk.
Right.
And so you have to try and be selective. There are a lot of really cool things. We're focusing on a few areas. We're focusing a ton on the buildings now. So we've had a lot of BMS systems that were emitting data, collecting data on a fairly well managed backbone, but it was a backbone that we've made 7 years ago. So we're right now going through a major upgrade. Our entire backbone is being lifted up to a layer 3, routable, very high speed, because we're looking at being able to look at any video camera anywhere in the portfolio from anywhere in the portfolio.
Really?
Yeah. And all of a sudden what we're seeing is that, in addition to that, plus all of the additional IoT devices that will be capturing data, the irony is that the corporate network will be slower than the IP backbone in the buildings.
That's amazing.
And the needs for speed are almost greater in the buildings. But so we're spending a lot of time on that. We're doing facial recognition on some of our turnstiles now, which is really, so in New York, almost all of our buildings are turnstile buildings. And the big ones have that's a pretty big bottleneck at the various.
Yeah, sure.
So you got the cards, you've got the RFIDs, there's a lot of ways to get in, but the best is the facial recognition, which we piloted at one, we're now putting it into several buildings.
Does it work well?
It's phenomenal.
You just walk, you just keep walking.
Yeah, so what happens is, and this is a great example of machine learning.
Yeah.
As a tenant, the visitors don't do. The visitors, you still get a
Sure.
badge. But for the tenants, you come to our building office. We have a well-lit booth with the right HD cameras and the software that captures your image. And we capture it until it turns green, and then we have a strong enough image, upload it into the system. And then every time you pass through a turnstile, it records you and learns more about you.
Oh.
So it's not like the first time.
One day you have a little goatee, the next day your hair's a little different.
It'll pick it up. It starts to pick up your walking habits, your gestures. It's very cool technology.
What's next? What's next for your company?
It's more of the same, uplifting the infrastructure in the buildings, so we have the most modern buildings that can support the best tenant amenities on that side. On the application side, it's we're still in the trenches, continuing to increase functionality. For us every year, as I talk about, it's our budgeting and forecasting, which is still the number one hardest thing that we all do.
Right.
And in our case, it's very detailed, and so we have an earnings model that ends up at a very high level. And right now, we're pretty much automated from the bottom all the way to the top of the earnings model. So we continue to pound that out to get more and more of the statistics that drive investor conferences and earnings calls and things to be more automated. One of the interesting ones, and they're here, is the Leverton folks. So AI is going to probably be very big in all the buildings, because the buildings are where all the big data is.
Right.
There's not a lot of big data in the corporate accounting world, although we've seen applications in auditing on AI, which we're actually starting to play with. But the really exciting one is abstracting leases. We abstract thousands and thousands of data points from every lease. In addition to all the accounting data, we have an extremely comprehensive non-financial part of our abstract. So for us, anytime we want to find out who has what in which building, clauses, conditions, and so forth, we query our database and we get our answers.
I see.
We tried to get our asset managers and leasing people to not have to go to the lease to get answers. And we've been pretty successful. When it's a really important issue and they wanted the exact language, they'll pull up the lease, but you can't do macro searches that way. So our tenant data warehouse is very important, but what it takes to build it is considerable because of the amount of data points we extract from a lease. So, along comes the potential AI solution that can read a lease and pull the data points. It's very exciting. So we're gonna go down the road and take a look at that, and it's a fun space right now.
Very cool. Anything else to say to either your current customers or your future customers?
You keep looking for landlords who have their eyes focused on providing the best amenities in the finest buildings, and that's certainly what we're focused on in New York. Is that.
Terrific.
Yeah.
Robert, thank you so much. Robert Entin, Vornado.
Good to see you.
Thanks for always coming and giving us a nice new context through which to view the unfolding event.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.